For our last fall farm update, we want to share with you the amazing transformation our Grow Lunch garden has undergone since we first started working on it this spring. When we first visited the plot, it looked very different than it does now. The soil was very compact and had clay-like features, even after the tractor went through it. Thanks to Topaz Farm, the soil was tilled several times, but even then, we knew we would have to give it a lot of care. We also knew that we had a lot of weeding ahead of us. The space was full of weeds that were excited to grow. The two growing the most were thistle and amaranth, sometimes called pigweed. We were not able to get out to the garden much in the spring because we were practicing physical distancing. When we did start getting back out there, we first had to move all of our supplies from our old site, here's a photo of our old Grow Lunch garden, to our new site at Topaz Farm. The summer began quickly, and we helped support Topaz Farm as they learned their new farm. By midsummer, we were ready to make our first big planting push. The soil was tilled by the large tractors. Thanks, Topaz. It had a nice consistency, and all of the weeds were tamed down. We spent some time leveling out the garden and created a large rectangular area for the bulk of our annual crop beds. Once the garden was measured, we were delighted to bring on some summer interns to support in the process. We also worked with volunteers and were so excited about the generous gifts of plants we received. Thanks to Sprig and Sprout, we were able to add a whole row of thyme for our sensory garden bed and plant tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. Most of our annual garden is surrounded by various flower beds that act as hedgerows. One is the sensory garden, which is filled with plants you can touch, taste, smell, and look at. Check out some of the flowers and herbs in the sensory garden: alyssum, calendula, thyme, and so much more. Surrounding other sides of the annual garden are flower hedges with various beautiful flowers planted in them. We are also working on a very exciting project in these areas. We're in the process of developing a large food forest around the garden, focusing on indigenous foods from the area, as well as international foods. As our garden began to grow this summer, so did the weeds. We had many work parties where we pulled out the weeds by hand. It was hard work. We're focusing on this being a farm and garden space where we can use our bodies to do a lot of the labor. This way, we teach people some farming and gardening skills and also keep our bodies active. Lucky for us, we had lots of amazing people around to help us in our efforts. We had summer interns, summer campers, folks from Topaz, and so many volunteers. When we all worked together, we got so much done, learned a lot, and had a great time. There are 2 triangle beds inside our giant rectangular garden. These were put into the design as flower beds. The Portland State University capstone students we work with helped us measure them out to make sure they were even and balanced triangles. We love using math and geometry in the garden. Another project we worked on was making circular beds. These will be so great in the future when we can show them to students of all ages and they can work together in a small garden space. We worked with 8th graders from Sauvie Island School to help us measure, design, and create these circular beds. We want the garden to encompass many different styles and not just stick to one linear way of growing things. We're lucky to have such a large space, which gives us the opportunity to use many different planting methods. As a learning garden, we're excited to explore various ways that we can grow food and plants and integrate practices from around the world. Here's another example of a different planting method we're trying out. This video is taking us through the meandering pathway to the moon garden that we will plant next year. We love planting flowers in our annual growing rows. We planted traditional crops that grow well in our region, like tomatoes, peppers, peas, parsnips, onions, broccolini, basil, and radishes. And we also planted full rows of flowers so that pollinators will come to the area. This row is full of beautiful zinnias. With so much love and support from our community, our garden was able to grow enough that our volunteers, interns, and staff took home several harvests this year. Check out this beautiful harvest of radishes we grew from seed, plus delicious cucumbers and hot peppers. Since we weren't able to get out to the garden much in the spring, we planted a lot of things later than we would have liked to. So next year, when we start planting earlier, we anticipate being able to harvest even more. We also planted some cover crops at the end of the summer, and were able to use some of the cover crops we planted as part of a lesson on seed saving. Along with our Portland State capstone students, we saved enough seeds from this beautiful buckwheat to plant a full garden row of it as a cover crop for next year. This first season, we were able to add some amendments, essential microorganisms, and various minerals to the soil. We're excited to add even more compost and organic matter next year. This winter, we're letting lots of cover crops grow and covered some of the garden with straw mulch. We work with what we have, so a lot of what we're able to do is based on the resources and generous donations we receive. We were so happy to be able to host some family field trips this fall. During field trips, students and their families were able to spend time in the garden planting and harvesting. Families took home parsnips, green onions, basil, thyme, hot peppers, zinnias, radishes, and peas. Towards the end of the season, we lost a few things to the frost. We had a field trip scheduled for the last week of October, and we wanted our families to be able to take home flowers, but instead, an early frost ended their life cycle. But the great thing is that we'll leave these zinnias up so that the birds can eat their seeds through the winter months, and maybe we'll even have a brand new bed of flowers in the spring. You might remember that we like to use crop rotations so that over the winter, the garden is able to rest and recover, and some garden beds can continue to grow. Right now, we have some lettuce, spinach, and other hardy greens growing, so we'll see how they do through the winter months. We also have fava beans that we'll be able to harvest in the spring. We can't wait. By now, we have officially tucked our garden in for the winter with cover crops and straw mulch. We also put burlap down on our paths to help with erosion and weed control. We're so excited about the seasons ahead. One of the biggest projects we're working on is the food forest that will surround the garden with trees, bushes, and other plants. This will create an area that looks like a forest, and all the plants in it will provide food, medicine, fiber, or add nutrients to the soil. We can't wait to continue sharing our garden with you as we tend to it and watch it grow. Look how far we've come already. See you next year.